Erev Tov Rabotai, we are continuing with the Mishna Yomi, Masechet Bava Kamma. We are up to Perek Daled Mishnah Bet. Today's Mishnayot should be Le'elu Nishmat, Neria ben Svetlana, Ranbayev, Eliyahu ben Burcha, Israel of Chana bad Miriam, Sison ben Raya, Yoshua ben Shifra, Menuchatam began Eden, Amen, Eleavdi ben Chaim Lechaim, V'derefua Shenemav, Daniel Shalom ben Rosa, B'tok Shah Cholei Israel. We have learned that once a tam animal gores or otherwise attacks 3 times and its owner was warned each time, it becomes a muad. This Mishnah discusses the law where an animal gored certain types of animals 3 times, but it refrained from goring other types of animals. Shoshu muad lemino veno muad l'sheno mino. These are the laws of an ox that is a muad to gore animals of its own species, but is not a muad to gore animals that are not of its own species. The ox gored other oxen 3 times, but it did not gore any other types of animals, though it had the chance to do so. Now, just as a side note, the commentaries explain, however, if the ox had no chance to gore any other species, we cannot say that it is still a tam in regard to them. Rather, since it is a muad for oxen, it is a muad for all the species as well. But back to our Mishnah regarding an ox that is a muad to gore animals of its own species, but is not a muad to gore animals that are not of its own species because it had refrained even when it had the chance to do so. Mu'ad la'adam ve'en mu'ad le'behema, or an ox that is a mu'ad to gore people, but is not a mu'ad to gore animals, meaning it gored people 3 times, but not gore animals that it saw. Mu'ad le'ktanim ve'en mu'ad le'gdolim, or an ox that is a mu'ad to gore young animals, but is not a mu'ad to gore grown animals. For example, it gored 3 calves, but did not gore mature oxen, even though it had the opportunity to do so. And the same applies to people. The ox gored 3 children, but refrained from goring adults that it saw. If it later gored those animals or people toward which it is a muad, its owner pays full damages. But if it gored those toward which it is not a muad, he pays only half damages. Although the animal is a muad in regard to the types of animals that it attacked, it remains a tam in regard to the types that it refrained from attacking. Therefore, if it does attack an animal of the second type, the owner pays only half. Now a question about a similar case. Amru lifnei Rabbi Yehuda, the student said before Rabbi Yehuda, Harei she'em muad l'shabbatot ve'en muad l'chol. What is the law where the ox is a muad to gore on Shabbat, but is not a muad to gore on weekdays? Meaning, it gored on 3 consecutive Shabbat days, but did not gore animals that it saw on weekdays. I apologize. If we say that its goring is linked specifically to Shabbat, the owner would have to pay in full for damage it does on Shabbat, but only half for what it does on weekdays. However, if we say that all days are considered the same, and therefore its goring is not linked to Shabbat, the ox is not a muad at all, because it refrained from goring during the days that came between each Shabbat and the next. According to the second approach, the owner would have to pay only half even for damage it does on Shabbat. Now, the reason to link an animal's goring specifically to Shabbat is that since an animal does not work on Shabbat, it feels more arrogant on that day, a feeling that might make it more aggressive. A different explanation is that since people wear special clothing on Shabbat, the animal will not recognize even people that it sees often, which might provoke it into attacking. Amar lahem, Rabbi Yehuda said to them, L'shabbatot mishalem nezik shalem. For goring on Shabbat, its owner pays full damages because it is a muad on Shabbat. Limot achol mishalem chatzi nezik, but for goring on the weekdays, he pays half damages because it is a tam on weekdays. Rabbi Yehuda adds, and matai hu tam, and when is this animal a tam? Meaning, how can it go back to being a tam even on Shabbat? Misheachzor bo shlosha yemei Shabbatot, when it refrains from goring on 3 consecutive Shabbat days. Meaning, after the animal became a muad to gore on Shabbat, they led animals or people in front of it on 3 consecutive Shabbat days, and it did not attack them. It therefore goes back to being a tam. If it then gores again, even on Shabbat, its owner pays only half damages. And this is consistent with Rabbi Yehuda's opinion in chapter 2, Mishnah 4. And that is end of Mishnah Bet. Mishnah Gimel begins, Shor Shel Israel, Shenagach Shor Shel Hekdesh. If the ox of a Jew gored an ox of Hekdesh, meaning an ox that belongs to the temple treasury, or one that was sanctified as an offering, Shel Hekdesh Shenagach Shor Shel Israel, or if an ox of Hekdesh gored the ox of a Jew, Patur, the owner of the ox that gored is not obligated to pay for the damage. In the Mishnah's first case, the owner does not have to pay the temple treasury for the damage that his animal did. In the second case, the temple treasury does not have to pay for the damage that its animal did. These explanations apply whether the ox that gored was a tam or a mu'ad. Shenemar, as it is stated in Shemot chapter 21 verses 35 and 36, Sho re'ehu, if the ox of a man strikes the ox of his fellow, he, referring to the owner, shall surely pay. By stating the ox of his fellow, the verse implies that it refers only to an ox belonging to an ordinary Jew, v'lo shor shel hekdesh, and not to an ox of hekdesh. It is derived from here that damages are not paid where an ox of hekdesh is involved, whether it was the animal that gored or the victim of the goring. By describing the nizak, the victim, as a fellow of the mazik, the damager, the Torah implies that they must be similar to each other in order for one to have to pay damages to the other. The verse therefore excludes the temple treasury, which is not similar to an ordinary individual. Although the Mishnah speaks only of goring, the category of keren, which is unusual damage, the same applies to other types of damage, the categories of pit, bor, shen, tooth, and regel, foot, as the Rav explains in the commentary to his Mishnah in chapter 1, Mishnah 2. A similar law, Shor shel Yisrael shenagach l'shor shel oved kochavim, if the ox of a Jew gored the ox of an idolater, whether the ox that gored was a tam or a muad, paturi is not obligated to pay for the damage. In the time of the Mishnah, idolaters did not obligate a person to pay for damage caused by his animals. We deal with them according to their own laws, as the Rambam writes in Ichud Nizkei Mamon, chapter 8, Halacha 5, with the commentary of the Maggid Mishnah. V'shel oved kochavim shenagach l'shor shel Yisrael, but if the ox of an idolater gored the ox of a Jew, ben tam ben muad, whether the ox that gored was a tam or a muad, mishalem nezik shalem, he pays full damages. Idolaters were not careful in those times to prevent their animals from doing damage. They therefore were penalized so that they would take responsibility for their animals, as the Rambam writes in the halacha that we quoted. And the Mishnah's rulings apply only to uncivilized nations. We may not discriminate against nations that have codes of law and civility, as the Meiri explains. And that is the Rabotai of today's Mishna Yomi. Baruch Adonai Leolam. Amen v'amen.